The pristine blue water shimmered innocently in the afternoon sun, but Karen Henderson's face twisted with rage as she pointed an accusing finger across the fence. "That pool is illegal and I'm calling the authorities," she shrieked, her voice carrying across the quiet suburban street. What she didn't know was that within 48 hours, it wouldn't be Marcus who'd be explaining himself to the police. It would be her. And the truth she'd uncover would shatter everything she thought she knew about her perfect neighborhood and the dark secrets hiding behind manicured lawns. Part 1. Marcus Williams stood at his kitchen window, coffee mug in hand, watching the sunrise paint golden streaks across his backyard. The new pool installation crew would arrive in an hour, and after 18 months of saving every penny, he was finally making his dream a reality. At 34, the high school history teacher had worked 3 summers of construction to afford this moment, a small slice of paradise in his modest corner of Maple Grove subdivision. The sound of aggressive knocking shattered his peaceful morning. Marcus opened the front door to find Karen Henderson from next door, her perfectly styled blonde hair already immaculate at 7 a.m., clutching a thick folder of papers. Behind her stood her husband Derek, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. "We need to talk," Karen announced, pushing past Marcus into his living room without invitation. "This pool situation ends today." "Good morning to you too, Karen," Marcus said evenly, though his jaw tightened. "What exactly is the problem?" Karen slammed the folder onto his coffee table. "The problem is that your little construction project is going to destroy my property values. Do you have any idea what waterfront properties go for in this area?" "Waterfront?" Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Karen, we're 15 miles from the nearest lake." "Don't get smart with me," she snapped. "I've done my research. Pools attract noise, crowds, parties. My Derek works hard for our lifestyle, and we won't have it ruined by some teacher who thinks he can turn his backyard into a public swimming facility." Derek shifted uncomfortably. "Honey, maybe we should—" "No," Karen whirled on her husband. "I've already talked to the Homeowners Association, the city planning office, and my lawyer. There are regulations about pools, setbacks, drainage. I bet he doesn't have half the permits he needs." Marcus felt heat rising in his chest. For 2 years, Karen had found reasons to complain about everything from his lawn height to his mailbox color. But this crossed a line. "Actually, I have every permit required," Marcus said quietly. "The city inspector approved the plans 3 months ago. Everything's legal and up to code." Karen's eyes narrowed. "We'll see about that." "Derek, show him." Derek reluctantly pulled out his phone and showed Marcus a video of their backyard. "She recorded this yesterday. The construction trucks blocked our driveway for 20 minutes. "That was the delivery truck," Marcus explained. "They had to unload the pool shell. I talked to your wife about it last week." "For 20 minutes!" Karen's voice hit a shriek. 20 minutes I couldn't get to my yoga class. Do you know how much those sessions cost?" Marcus stared at her, incredulous. "Karen, are you serious right now?" "Dead serious." She pulled a business card from her purse. "This is my attorney, Bradley Hutchinson. He specializes in property disputes. 1 phone call from me, and your little project gets shut down faster than you can say, building violation." The doorbell rang, saving Marcus from a response he might regret. Through the window, he could see the pool installation crew's trucks arriving. "That's my crew," Marcus said. "We're done here." "Oh, we're far from done," Karen snarled. "You have no idea who you're dealing with. My husband sits on the city planning committee. My brother-in-law is a county inspector. My cousin runs the permit office. You think some underpaid teacher can fight the Henderson family network?" Derek looked mortified. "Karen, please! Don't you dare, Karen, please me." She spun on her husband. "This is exactly why people walk all over us. Because you're too weak to stand up for what's ours." Marcus watched Derek's face flush red, but the man said nothing. Years of marriage to Karen had apparently beaten the fight out of him. "I'm calling Bradley right now," Karen continued, pulling out her phone. "And then I'm calling the city to report an illegal construction project. We'll see how far your little permits get you when they're challenged by someone who actually knows people." She stormed toward the door, Derek trailing behind like a scolded puppy. "Oh, and Marcus," Karen turned back with a venomous smile. I'd enjoy today if I were you, because tomorrow this all gets shut down. And maybe I'll have the city take a closer look at that shed of yours too. Something tells me it's not up to code either. The door slammed hard enough to rattle the windows. Marcus stood in his living room, hands clenched, as the reality of the situation settled in. Karen Henderson wasn't just a difficult neighbor. She was a woman with connections and enough spite to use them. And she'd just declared war. Outside, he could hear the construction crew setting up equipment. Team leader Jose Ramirez knocked and entered, carrying clipboards and wearing a concerned expression. "Everything okay, Mr. Williams? We saw some people leaving who looked pretty upset." "Neighbor issues," Marcus said. "Nothing that should affect the work." "You have all the permits and approvals, right?" Jose nodded. "Everything's been triple-checked. We do this for a living. We don't mess around with permitting. But I gotta ask, that lady who just left? She seemed pretty angry." "Karen Henderson. She's been trying to control the entire neighborhood since she moved in 3 years ago. Apparently, my pool is somehow going to ruin her life." "Ah, we get those." Jose smiled grimly. "Trust me, we've dealt with worse. But heads up, people like that sometimes call in false complaints to slow down projects. City has to respond to every call, which means inspections, delays, paperwork." Marcus felt his stomach drop. Can they actually stop the project? If everything's legal? No, but they can make life miserable for a while. My advice? Document everything. Photos, videos, copies of all permits. And maybe consider security cameras if things get weird. As if summoned by the conversation, Marcus's phone rang. The caller ID showed City Planning Office. "Mr. Williams, this is Janet Morrison from the City Planning Department. We've received a complaint about an unpermitted pool construction at your address. We'll need to send an inspector out first thing tomorrow morning to verify all permits and compliance." Marcus closed his eyes. "All my permits are current and approved. This is clearly a harassment complaint." "I understand your frustration, sir, but we have to investigate every complaint. The inspector will be there at 8 a.m. sharp. Please have all documentation ready." The line went dead. Jose shook his head sympathetically. That was fast, even for a motivated complainant. Your neighbor must have some serious connections. Marcus watched through his window as Karen paced in her backyard, phone pressed to her ear, gesturing wildly. Even from a distance, her body, language radiated fury and determination. "All right," Marcus said, straightening his shoulders. "She wants to play hardball? Let's see what she's really made of." For the next 8 hours, Marcus documented everything. He photographed every permit, every approval letter, every piece of communication with the city. He called his own contact. At the planning office, his former student Sarah Chen, now a junior inspector, who confirmed his permits were ironclad. But as the day progressed, the harassment escalated. At noon, a noise control officer arrived, responding to complaints about excessive construction noise during quiet hours. The officer found nothing wrong. Construction was well within permitted hours and decibel limits. At 2 p.m., a code enforcement officer appeared, investigating reports of improper waste disposal. Again, nothing. The crew was following proper procedures for concrete and packaging materials. At 4 p.m., Karen herself appeared at the fence line, with a measuring tape, claiming the pool was being installed too close to the property boundary. Jose calmly showed her the survey markers and official setback measurements. Each false complaint wasted time, disrupted work, and cost Marcus money as the crew dealt with interruptions instead of installation. By evening, the pool shell was finally in place, but they were a full day behind schedule. Jose looked exhausted and frustrated. "Mr. Williams, I've been doing this for 15 years, and I've never seen anything like today. That woman called in 7 different complaints. 7. My crew spent more time talking to city officials than actually working." Marcus felt rage building in his chest. Karen's campaign wasn't just vindictive, it was calculated and relentless. At 8 p.m., his doorbell rang again. This time it was Derek Henderson, alone, looking haggard and embarrassed. "Marcus, I'm sorry about today. Karen? She gets like this sometimes, when she feels like someone's not respecting her authority." "Authority?" Marcus stared at him. "Derek, she doesn't have authority over my property, or anyone else's." Derek ran his hands through his thinning hair. I know that. But she grew up in a family where her father was a judge, her mother was on the school board, her grandfather was mayor. She's used to people deferring to her. When they don't, she destroys them? She tries to. Derek's voice was barely a whisper. Marcus, I'm telling you this as a neighbor, as someone who has to live with her every day. Back down. Find a compromise. Marcus Williams sat in his home office at 11 p.m., surrounded by printouts, sticky notes, and 3 empty coffee cups. His laptop screen glowed with the fruits of 4 hours of methodical research, a digital spiderweb connecting Karen Henderson to a network of influence that made his stomach turn. The deeper he dug, the clearer the picture became. Karen wasn't just a difficult neighbor with connections. She was the architect of a systematic corruption scheme that had been operating in Maple Grove for 3 years. His phone buzzed with a text from Sarah Chen, his former student at the planning office. Marcus, heads up. Your 8 a.m. inspection got moved to 6 a.m. Someone higher up pushed for priority processing. Also, the inspector assigned is William Henderson. Relation? Marcus's blood ran cold. He typed back, Karen's brother-in-law. This is getting serious. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Finally, be careful. There's talk about irregularities in your permit application. Things that weren't there yesterday. Marcus stared at the message. They were falsifying documents now. He grabbed his phone and called Jose Ramirez. Mr. Williams, it's pretty late, man. Jose, I need you here at 5:30 a.m. tomorrow with every piece of original documentation you have. Permits, surveys, approvals, everything. They're going to try to claim there are problems with the paperwork. Jose was quiet for a moment. How do you know? Because the inspector coming tomorrow is Karen Henderson's brother-in-law. And according to my source, someone's been altering documents. Jesus. Jose's voice was grim. Okay, I'll be there. But Marcus, if they're willing to forge city documents, this is way bigger than a neighbor dispute. You might want to consider backing down. I can't do that. Why not? It's just a pool, man. Marcus looked at his research spread across the desk. Phone records he'd pulled through a Freedom of Information Act request. Property transfer documents showing suspicious patterns. City contract awards that defied logical bidding processes. Because it's not about the pool anymore. The next morning, Marcus stood in his backyard at 5:45 a.m., watching Jose's crew arrive with boxes of documentation. The pool shell sat like a concrete crater, waiting for plumbing and electrical work. That might never come. At exactly 6 a.m., a city vehicle pulled into his driveway. William Henderson emerged, a tall, thin man with Karen's same cold eyes and entitled bearing. Behind him came a second man carrying a thick briefcase. Mr. Williams, I'm Inspector Henderson, and this is my associate, Inspector Morrison. We're here about numerous violations in your pool installation. Violations? Marcus kept his voice level. What violations? Henderson consulted his clipboard. Improper setbacks, inadequate drainage planning, structural concerns with the shell installation, and questions about the validity of your original permits. Jose stepped forward. Sir, I've been installing pools for 15 years. Every measurement has been verified by city survey. Every permit has been approved through proper channels. Henderson barely glanced at him. Are you a licensed city inspector, Mr. Ramirez? And no, but then your opinion is irrelevant. Henderson turned back to Marcus. Mr. Williams, I'm going to need you to halt all construction immediately while we conduct a full investigation. Marcus felt the trap closing, but he'd prepared for this moment. Inspector Henderson, before we go any further, I need to ask, are you related to Karen Henderson at 1247 Oak Street? Henderson's jaw tightened. My personal relationships are not relevant to this inspection. Actually, they are. Marcus pulled out his phone and showed a document. According to City Ethics Policies, Section 4.2, any inspector with a personal or family relationship to a complainant must recuse themselves from the case. Your sister-in-law filed the original complaint. I don't have to. Furthermore, Marcus continued, Section 8.1 states that any inspector found to be acting with bias or conflict of interest can be subject to immediate suspension and criminal investigation. Inspector Morrison shifted uncomfortably. Henderson's face was turning red. "Are you threatening me, Mr. Williams?" "I'm citing city policy. Would you like me to call the ethics hotline right now to clarify the rules?" For a moment, Marcus thought Henderson might explode. Then the man's expression shifted to something more calculating. "Fine. Morrison will handle the primary inspection. I'll observe for training purposes." Marcus smiled. "I'm afraid that's still a conflict of interest. But I'll tell you what, let's call Supervisor Janet Morrison and have her send a completely independent inspector. That way, there's no question about the validity of the inspection." Henderson stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Listen carefully. Teacher, you're playing a game you don't understand with people you can't afford to cross. Walk away now, or things are going to get very unpleasant for you." "Is that a threat, Inspector Henderson?" "It's friendly advice." Marcus pulled out his phone again, this time opening a recording app. "Could you repeat that advice? I want to make sure I understand your official position as a city inspector." Henderson stared at the phone, then at Marcus's calm expression. Something flickered in his eyes, the first hint of uncertainty. "This inspection is postponed pending administrative review," he said curtly. "All construction remains halted." The two men left quickly, Henderson speaking urgently into his phone as they drove away. Jose whistled low. "Damn, Marcus, you just backed down a city inspector. But you know they're going to come at you even harder now, right? Let them try." Marcus spent the rest of the morning making phone calls. First to Janet Morrison's supervisor, filing a formal complaint about inspector bias. Then to the city attorney's office, requesting clarification on ethics policies. Finally, to the local newspaper's investigative reporter, a woman named Diana Torres who'd been looking into city contract irregularities. At 2 p.m., Diana Torres arrived at his house, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s with a reputation for tenacious reporting. "Mr. Williams, you said on the phone you have information about corruption in the city planning department. That's a serious accusation." Marcus led her to his office and spread out his research. 3 years ago, Karen Henderson moved to Maple Grove. Since then, look at the pattern of city contracts, permit approvals, and property disputes. Diana studied the documents, her expression growing more interested by the minute. "The Johnson construction case," Marcus continued. "Tom Johnson's company lost 3 major contracts after a dispute with Karen Henderson. All 3 projects went to Hartwell Construction instead." "Okay, that's suspicious, but not necessarily." Hartwell Construction is owned by Derek Henderson's business partner, Michael Hartwell. They've received 17 city contracts in 3 years, despite having higher bids than competitors in 11 cases. Diana looked up sharply. "You have proof of the bid amounts?" Marcus handed her another folder. "Freedom of Information Act requests. It's all public record, but no one bothered to connect the dots." For the next hour, Marcus walked Diana through the web of connections. William Henderson approving permits for properties that Karen later purchased at below-market prices. City inspectors finding sudden violations in businesses owned by people who'd crossed Karen. Zoning variances granted to Karen's friends while being denied to others with identical requests. "This is..." Diana shook her head. "This is a systematic corruption network. How did no one notice?" "Because they're smart about it. Nothing too obvious, nothing that screams corruption by itself. But when you map it all out..." Diana was already on her phone. "I need to make some calls. Can you send me digital copies of everything?" "Already prepared." Marcus handed her a flash drive. "But Diana, there's something else. I think they're going to try to destroy evidence. Karen called her brother-in-law the minute she realized I wasn't backing down. They're in damage control mode." As if summoned by their conversation, Marcus's doorbell rang. Through the window, he could see a police cruiser in his driveway. Diana Torres gathered her materials quickly. "I'll go out the back. Keep your mouth shut about our meeting until my story runs." Marcus opened the front door to find 2 police officers, one older, one young and nervous-looking. "Mr. Williams? I'm Officer Rodriguez. This is Officer Chen. We need to ask you some questions about harassment complaints filed against you." "Harassment complaints?" The older officer consulted his notepad. Mrs. Karen Henderson has filed charges claiming you've been making threatening phone calls, taking unauthorized photographs of her property, and engaging in stalking behavior. Marcus felt the world tilt. That's completely false. I have phone records proving I never called her, and any photographs I took were of my own property from my own yard. Do you have any witnesses who can verify your whereabouts yesterday evening? I was home doing research. My neighbor Derek Henderson can probably verify. Marcus stopped. Wait, Derek is her husband. He's not going to contradict her story. Officer Chen spoke up. Sir, we also have reports that you threatened a city inspector this morning. I cited city ethics policies to an inspector who had a clear conflict of interest. That's not a threat. That's knowing my rights. Officer Rodriguez studied Marcus carefully. Mr. Williams, I'm going to be straight with you. Mrs. Henderson has presented what appears to be compelling evidence of harassment. Phone records showing calls from your number, photographs taken with metadata indicating they were. At 6:47 a.m., Marcus Williams stood at his kitchen window, watching 3 black SUVs roll silently down Maple Grove's pristine street. Agent Sarah Martinez had called 20 minutes earlier with a simple message. Stay inside and keep your doors locked. This ends today. The vehicle stopped in front of Karen's house with military precision. Agents emerged, their movements coordinated and purposeful. Marcus counted 12 federal officers, some heading to the front door, others positioning around the property's perimeter. The hammering on Karen's door echoed through the quiet neighborhood. FBI, open up! Marcus held his breath, watching the upstairs window where he'd seen Karen pacing the night before. A curtain twitched, then dropped. Silence stretched for 30 seconds before chaos erupted. The sound of shattering glass pierced the morning air as Karen burst through her back patio door, barefoot and desperate, clutching a laptop bag. She sprinted across her manicured lawn toward the fence line separating her property from the woods behind the subdivision. Runner, back perimeter. Agent Martinez's voice carried across the yard as federal agents converged from multiple directions. Karen vaulted the fence with surprising athleticism, disappearing into the tree line as officers gave chase. Marcus could hear branches snapping, shouted commands, and the distant sound of pursuing footsteps. 15 minutes later, the woods fell silent. Marcus's phone rang, Agent Martinez breathing hard. She's gone. Vanished into the state forest. We've got helicopters and K-9 units en route, but she knows these woods. This was planned. What about Derek? Safe and in custody. When we breached the house, we found him locked in the basement, barely conscious. She'd given him enough digitalis to simulate a heart attack. Another hour, and he'd be dead. Marcus felt his legs go weak. She was going to kill him this morning? Looks like it. Your investigation forced her timeline. She was trying to tie up loose ends before disappearing. 2 hours later, Marcus sat in the same federal building conference room, but now the atmosphere was electric with urgency. Agent Martinez spread photos across the table, surveillance images, financial records, and a map showing red dots across multiple states. Elena Kozlov isn't just a con artist, Marcus. She's a ghost. In 20 years of operation, no law enforcement agency has ever gotten this close to capturing her. So she's done this before? The Vanishing Act? At least 6 times that we know. She has escape routes, safe houses, new identities pre-established everywhere she operates. What you uncovered in Maple Grove? It's the most complete picture we've ever had of her methods. Agent Martinez pointed to the map. These red dots represent her previous locations: Phoenix, Denver, Portland, Nashville, Atlanta. Each time, the same pattern. Find a weak man with connections, establish a corruption network, eliminate him when she's extracted maximum value, then disappear. But you caught her other crimes? We suspected. But Elena is careful. She never leaves evidence. Never stays in one place long enough for patterns to emerge. Until now. Marcus studied the photographs of Karen. Some showing her as a blonde in Phoenix, a brunette in Denver, a redhead in Portland. Different names, different appearances, but the same cold, calculating eyes. Agent Martinez, what made this time different? You. She leaned forward. Every other victim either died or was too traumatized to piece together what happened. You're the first person who fought back effectively, who documented everything, who forced her hand before she could complete her plan. Marcus's phone buzzed, with an unknown number. Agent Martinez nodded for him to answer, quickly signaling for a trace. Marcus Williams? The voice was unmistakably Karen's, but stripped of all pretense. Cold, clinical, dangerous. Hello, Elena. A pause. So you know. I know you're a serial killer. I know you've murdered at least 6 people. I know you were planning to kill Derek this morning. Derek was weak. They're all weak. Men like him deserve what they get. Agent Martinez was frantically signaling to keep her talking, but Marcus felt rage building in his chest. What about the Johnsons? The families you destroyed? The lives you ruined just to maintain your little power games? Elena laughed, a sound devoid of any human warmth. Collateral damage. You can't make an omelet without breaking eggs. Is that what you told yourself when you poisoned your other husbands? They served their purpose, just like Derek would have if you hadn't interfered. Her voice turned venomous. You have no idea what you've cost me, Marcus. Years of work, millions in assets, a perfect setup. Good. Don't get too comfortable. In that pool of yours, this isn't over. The line went dead. Agent Martinez looked up from her equipment, shaking her head. Bounced through too many towers. She's using sophisticated equipment. That evening, Marcus returned home to find Jose and his crew working under floodlights, rushing to complete the pool installation. Figured you'd want this finished as soon as possible, Jose explained. After everything that's happened, you deserve to enjoy it. Marcus watched the workers tile the pool's edge, their movements efficient and purposeful. The concrete crater was finally becoming the oasis he'd dreamed of. Jose, aren't you worried about working after dark? Elena's still out there. Jose gestured to unmarked vehicles positioned around the neighborhood. FBI's got this place locked down tighter than Fort Knox. Besides, I've been thinking about what that woman put you through. Finishing this pool? It's like giving her the finger. At 11 p.m., Marcus's phone rang again. This time, it was Derek Henderson, calling from protective custody. Marcus, I need to tell you something. About Elena. About the basement. Derek, you don't have to... Yes, I do. Derek's voice was stronger than Marcus had ever heard it. When she locked me down there this morning, she thought I was unconscious, but I heard her making phone calls. She's not just running, Marcus. She's planning something. Marcus felt ice in his veins. What kind of something? Revenge. She kept saying that teacher needs to learn respect. She has contacts, Marcus. People who owe her favors. Dangerous people. Before Marcus could respond, every light in his house went out. Emergency lighting kicked in as Marcus heard movement outside. Footsteps. On gravel, the soft whisper of someone moving through his backyard. Agent Martinez's surveillance team should have stopped any approach, but the night had gone eerily quiet. Marcus grabbed the baseball bat he'd kept by his door since this whole nightmare began and moved toward the back window. The pool area was illuminated by work lights, casting harsh shadows across the newly finished concrete. A figure emerged from those shadows. Elena Kozlov stood at the edge of his property, no longer the pristine suburban housewife, but something feral and dangerous. Her designer clothes had been replaced by dark tactical gear. Her carefully styled hair was pulled back severely. In her hand, she held something that glinted in the work lights. A gun. Come outside, Marcus, she called softly. Let's finish this conversation. Marcus pressed himself against the wall, mind racing. Where were the FBI agents? How had she gotten past their surveillance? His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Your federal friends are temporarily indisposed. Just you and me now. Come outside or I start shooting your neighbor's windows. Marcus looked across the street where lights were beginning to come on as residents woke to the commotion. Children lived in those houses, families who'd already been terrorized enough. He unlocked his back door and stepped onto the patio, bat in hand. Elena smiled, the same cold expression he'd seen across the fence, but now utterly predatory. There's the brave teacher. Not hiding behind lawyers and federal agents now, are you? The FBI will be here any minute. No, they won't. I have friends in very useful places. Your protection detail received an urgent call about a domestic disturbance 3 blocks away. Amazing how realistic fake emergency calls can sound. Marcus gripped the bat tighter. What do you want, Elena? I want you to understand something. She stepped closer, gun aimed at his chest. I've spent 20 years perfecting my craft. I've eliminated obstacles much more dangerous than a high school teacher. You think stopping my Maple Grove operation was a victory? I think it saved Derek's life and put you where you belong. On the run like the criminal you are. Elena's eyes flashed with fury. Derek was an investment. 3 years of work, millions in potential returns, and you destroyed it all for what? A fucking swimming pool? I destroyed it because you're a monster who murders innocent people. Innocent? Elena laughed harshly. Derek was weak, pathetic, useless. He would have died of natural causes within 5 years anyway. I simply accelerated the timeline and made his death profitable. Marcus saw movement in his peripheral vision, shadows shifting near the fence line. Either the FBI had returned or Elena had brought backup. Here's what's going to happen, Elena continued. You're going to walk to the edge of that beautiful new pool. You're going to have an unfortunate accident, slip and fall, hit your head on the concrete, tragic ending for the neighborhood hero. And you think that solves your problems? It sends a message. No one interferes with my operations. No one costs me money. No one makes me run. Marcus shifted his weight, calculating distances. The pool was 10 feet behind him, Elena 15 feet in front. If he could get her talking, maybe buy time for help to arrive. You won't get away with this. Too many people, Kai.